I want you to do me a favor. I want you to look at your hands very closely. The palms and the back of your hands. I want you to notice them, spend time with them, to truly see them. Are you aware of the fact that however you have lived your life is reflected in your hands? Like if you have a tool in a toolbox you've had for a really long time, maybe your grandfather left it to you and you're still using it, and that tool begins to take a particular type of wear to it for the way it's been used. And the same is true of our hands. Years ago, I was involved in a spiritual practice that has stayed with me for years. And when I think of it, I find myself becoming very emotional. And I find myself connecting to it in a way that almost no other spiritual practice has affected me. It was an Eastern tradition, and it was about the idea of being fully present, to fully see what we're looking at, to fully hear what we're listening to fully be present with what is around us. And so the practice was that we were divided up into twos, and most of the people in the room I had never met before. I attended this practice because I'd heard about it and I wanted to attend it. And the reason I wanted to attend it is because I wanted to become more compassionate. I wanted to become more present. I wanted to become more graceful in my relationships. As a lot of you know, that professionally I have the term counselor behind my name. And I definitely wanted to do that better, but I know that my loved ones, I wanted them to have a nicer life with me as we show up in the travails of life. And so we were given a basin, and the basin had water in it. And we took turns on both sides of this practice. And so to start with, one person sat in a chair, and the other person knelt before them. And the basin of water was in the person in the chair's lap. And we were given some soap, and we were given a washcloth, and we were there to wash another person's hands in silence. And they didn't put their hands in the basin of water. We had to get their hands wet. We had to get their hands soapy. We had to wash their hands, be present for their hands, and then rinse and dry their hands. And while we did this, the person who was facilitating this talked generally about the idea, imagine those hands within your hands. Imagine the diapers they've changed. Imagine the gardening they've done. Imagine the instruments they've played. Imagine the insects whose lives they've taken. Imagine the pets who have been fed and loved with those hands. Imagine, hold on just a second. Go ahead and make yourself comfortable. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure you're comfortable. Okay. Imagine, for those of you who have had children, and they start walking around, and so if you're out in public with them and you're walking all day and you want them to hold your hand, your finger that they hold. For those of you who had children, you probably still remember that, what that was like. Those hands that you're washing today have wiped away tears of other people, of their own. They have wrapped around the back of someone they've hugged and patted the back. They have been clenched in anger, and they have been opened in love. They have cooked, they have eaten, they have cleaned, they have been decorated, and they have worked. The upshot of this practice that I went to was compassion, presence, love is something that we can't just walk in and be. It's all encompassed in being present. It's all encompassed in a type of intimacy. There's all types of intimacy, but the intimacy of what I would call humanity, the material, physical expression of what we are. And we know that our turn in this world is lived within heavy, dense energies of physical energy, like has been expressed. That's a physical energy. That's density. There's a weight to that. There's a weight to those words. That's part of the human experience. I had never met the person who I worked with that day ever before in my life. And today I can't remember her name. But in that moment, in terms of a spiritual type of intimacy, a presence, I don't know if I've ever been closer to anyone in my life. To sit and truly experience their life through their hands. To be present in that. Charles Fillmore has a quote in all of his material, and he was a co-founder of Unity, which is our sister philosophy in New Thought. And this is a quote that I just love so dearly because it inspires that magical spark that I love in the idea of metaphysics and spirituality. Fillmore says, the soul's innate desire for material expression asserts itself. So we talk about being eternal beings very often. It runs through all religion, eternal beings. And we spend a lot of time talking about where do we go? We celebrate it, we memorialize it, we talk about it, we are shocked by it, we shed tears about it, we have that conversation. But what about where we came from? When we talk about the soul, it is, I guess the idea is, the best way to put it, it is a stream of consciousness that moves throughout eternity. And so Fillmore says, once upon a time, this essence, this thing we would call the soul, this little spark of energy that is us, this little beacon of light. And he says, the soul's innate desire for material expression asserts itself and basically says, okay, I want to go in. I want to go into that physical expression. And through its yearning, seeks a primal cell and builds that physical expression. Wow, I love that. Why? Why would we want to do that? Why are we laughing at that? Because we're going, gravity, ever heard of it? Right? Raising a teenager, ever been there? Being a teenager, ever been there? Potty training, that's great. Divorce lawyers, that was a great turn. No offense to the law. Believe me, I was very thankful for my divorce attorney. Did me very well. You know, there's a part of us But I want to level that out. I mean, can you imagine the wildflowers this year on Table Mountain after this rain? Oh my God. So the soul is somewhere going, man, those wildflowers are so, I got to get me some of that. I got to get me some of that love. I got to get me some of the good food that's down there. I got to get me a walk in the forest, connection, community, relationships, intimacy. I want that. But then Ernest Holmes comes along. And Ernest Holmes has something very interesting to say about the soul. Ernest Holmes is the founder of our movement. And Holmes says, in the study of the soul, we learn that memory often retains thoughts and suppressed emotions, which more or less tear or bind. That's really interesting. Let me say that one more time. In the study of the soul, we learn that memory often retains thoughts and suppressed emotions, which more or less tear or bind. This is what is meant by inner conflict. I love that, because that's part of what the soul wanted too. And you want to know why the soul wanted that? I was off this last week, but a couple weeks ago, I had a conversation with one of my clients, and we were talking about how wonderful it is to have some wisdom. And she said to me, but Andy, why does it take so damn long? Sorry about that. I said, well, sweetie, that's what we're here to do. That's what we're here to do. We are in a season, the season of Easter, the holy season. And we all know, because you have a couple weeks of the holy season, the Catholics, the Greek Orthodox, all those people who have turned it into this amazing pageantry of the holy season. And we know that at the end, the chocolate bunnies, the eggs, the jelly beans, there is a resurrection. And we know that to get there, there's some carnage. We know that story. I'm not going to go into that story. I think someone next week's going to do that. But we know it. We've been kicking around religion long enough to know the metaphor, the mythology, the metaphysics of the crucifixion and what led up to that. But I want to talk today about the Greek Orthodox, who before today is Palm Sunday. So in the Holy Weeks, we're almost there. This is a real pivotal time. And Jesus spent some time in the garden confronting things, what we were just talking about. His soul came into the world to see the wildflowers on Table Mountain, but also to confront some of his issues in the garden. But the Greek Orthodox, we talk about Palm Sunday, they have what's called Lazarus Saturday. Now we all know the story of Lazarus, who was raised from the dead by Jesus, which is considered the greatest miracle. The greatest miracle he did was before what led up to the crucifixion. But let's talk about this for a moment. Let's look at it in terms of the metaphysics of it, the meaning of it, the metaphor of it. You see, Lazarus is identified in the Bible as a good friend of Jesus. He's the only person where the word friend is invoked. Jesus' friend. And Jesus was really tight with his sisters, Mary and Martha. So there was this family of brother and two sisters. Now, in order to understand this, we have to understand, say, the spiritual traditions of the Jewish and their culture at the time. And let's bring this into the metaphor. Let's bring this into the meaning. Why was Lazarus and his sisters good friends to Jesus? Well, because the fact of the matter is, Jesus being a teacher, Jesus being who he was, when he would go into homes and talk and have conversations and answer questions, because that's where they did it back then. They did it in homes. He was coming into the realm of the women. That was the realm. And that was the feminine side of Jesus, to come into that place, into that family. And so Lazarus and his two sisters opened their home up to him. And what Jesus, he became friends with them. He became close to them. He cared about them. He noticed their hands. He noticed how they lived. He noticed what their life was like. And so when he heard that Lazarus was gone, it affected him deeply. And so he went to the grave, and the sisters were a little bit upset because Lazarus was sick prior to this, and Jesus hadn't shown up. So he got a little bit of that, that feedback you get. Those clients you have who have decided that even though they've only known you for a month of their life, you're basically the problem because they can't look at the problem. But as a professional, that's okay. That's just fear. That just means they're hurting somewhere. That means there's some bruises on the hands from their life. And so Jesus, he stood in their presence, in the presence of the tomb, and it says Jesus wept because it was a friend. He was present. He was intimate. He saw what he was looking at. He heard what he was listening to. And so he had the tomb opened up, and he called forth Lazarus. And Lazarus came out. He'd been in there for 4 days. He was not in good shape, okay? And so there were people there that gathered at this commotion. And what Jesus had taught them is, basically, when someone is going through the fire of problems, challenges, we allow them to move through that process, but we do so from the place of compassion and love and shared humanity. So, a day or so later, now he is coming into Jerusalem. And the 12 people who hung out with him said, Jesus, what are you doing? Don't be going. You have upset these people. Don't go in there. You know what's going to happen. And the Romans, they were just angry. But the people who had seen Jesus at the tomb, they gathered together and they welcomed him in. And they threw down the palm fronds. That's hard for me to say. Palm fronds, which metaphysically represents strength, before the donkey that was carrying him. And they cried for him, and they loved him, and they welcomed him in to what was about ready to happen. And they were the same people who, on the other side of the crucifixion, welcomed him into the Christ. Why does the soul want to come here? To become the Christ. To put together the life wisdom through the dense and heavy energies of what this life is. What we've heard expressed just this morning. There is a Christ revelation, the Buddha nature, the Christ nature, the higher consciousness is on the other side. That's the experience that the soul wants. That's why we're here. And once upon a time, out there somewhere in the universe, our soul yearned for this. We yearned for the Christ. We yearned for that journey. So this morning, I want you to think for just a moment. if you have someone you care about, or maybe someone you've just met, and you know they walk in and they let you, I'm here. I want to achieve a higher consciousness. I see these suitcases I got. They're all full of a bunch of ugly stuff. This is my baggage. I'm here, and I want to move forward into wisdom. So you go, oh wow, really? You want to do that? Okay, it's going to be tough. This idea of transformation, this idea of evolution, this idea of gained wisdom is going to be tough. So we have Ernest Holmes, who wrote this book called The Science of Mind. It's about healing. It's about moving forward in consciousness. But at the very front of it, he has something that you received when you came in today. Now, I never met Ernest Holmes. I have no idea why he wrote this, but I'll tell you why I think he wrote it. It's like, okay, if this is what you want, let's get comfortable. Okay? So, I want you to imagine, either for yourself or someone you love, and you know that they're about ready to really go through it in some way, shape, or form. And they've decided that they want to move into a place of spiritual growth, of revelation, of gained wisdom. So bring that up in your mind for just a moment. Whether it's your face or their face. And now we're going to read this together. You ready? Peace be unto thee. I have left the gate open, and thou art welcome to our home. There is room for all. I have swept the hearth and lighted the fire. The room is warm and cheerful, and you will find comfort and rest within. The table is laid, and the fruits of life are spread before thee. A quenching beverage is here also. It sparkles in the light. I have set a chair for you, where the sunbeams dance through the shade. Sit and rest. Refresh and restore your soul. Eat of the fruit. Drink of the beverage. All is yours, and you are welcome. And so it is. Happy Palm Sunday, you guys. Thank you very much. All right.